Tom Clancy is known for his best-selling novels, including The Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, and Debt of Honor. His latest effort is nonfiction. Into the Storm is the first in a series that will look into the art of war as practiced by some of the country's top generals. The co-author is General Fred Franks, the commander whose 7th Corps was largely responsible for the victory in the Gulf. It details the transformation of the American military from the bleak days after the Vietnam War to the victorious Desert Storm operation. I am pleased to have both of them here for this conversation about American Armed Services from the end of World War II to Vietnam to Desert Storm and some of the lessons that have been learned. Welcome back.
Hey, Charlie.
General, pleasure to have you on the broadcast.
Thank you very much.
Let me turn first to Tom. What's this about? I mean, why are you doing this, and why aren't you home writing novels?
Well, I mean, all work and no play and all that stuff. I just wanted to do something different. And there's a large educational component to my novels. This time, to do it properly, I had to do it a different way. The idea is to show people just how smart you got to be a Fred Franks. I mean, what it takes to be a commander, the intellectual dimension, the learning process, 25 years of learning before you're ready to be a general. It's time people knew just, what a general is, what he has to do, how hard it is to be that, how hard it is to do the job well.
All right, let's talk about some of those. I mean, what is the questions you just raised? How hard is it to be a general? I mean, what's the difficulty and challenge, and what kind of experience and intellectual discipline shapes you for that role?
Well, Tom's very kind. And I
set you up, didn't he?
I certainly appreciate that very much. And in 7th Corps, obviously, was me and 146,000 other soldiers, and I had a great team, and we were a team. What we did as a team, Charlie. So, thanks for your introduction. But in 7th Corps, anyway, we were a great team. I think in the Army, to get to be a commander, the longest development process we have in the United States Army is development of a commander. It takes less time to develop a tank, less time to develop an Apache helicopter than it does to develop a commander. It takes anywhere from 22 to 25 years before we entrust a division of soldiers to a commander. It takes 15 to 17 years for us to develop a lieutenant colonel before we will entrust the lives of American men and women to them on the battlefield. So you have to command at every echelon. You have to continue to grow and to learn and to study your profession, to learn by your own experience, to learn by study, school, reading, professional reading, and learn from others. So it's a total professional involvement.
Let me take your experience then. First, I guess we should start in Vietnam?
Yes. Well, I was commissioned from West Point, the military academy, in 1959, and had a series of assignments prior to that.
You got to Vietnam in what, 67?
1969.
69.
Summer of 69. Yes, I was a major.
This was after Tet?
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when you got there, how was it different than what you expected?
It was not real different, other than the application of what I knew, of course, had to be conditioned by the terrain and the enemy over there. But what I pleasantly found were great young men and women in the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. It was a great team. They had won battle after battle after battle. And so I was proud to rejoin my old regiment, the Black Horse, the 11th ACR. So what I found were soldiers who day after day were out there doing their job, doing their mission, winning battle after battle, but the war wasn't going anywhere.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I think that's a real big reason big difference between perhaps Vietnam and Desert Storm. A strategic objective, clear, a set of tactical methods determined to reach the strategic objective, and then the authority to use all means at your disposal to get to that strategic objective. That was not present in Vietnam, and certainly it was in Desert Storm.
And was it because, and now this is a question that I want Tom to speak to as well, simply that so many of the men in command at Desert Storm, you, Colin Powell, and others, Schwarzkopf, had been shaped by Vietnam?
Well, I think that certainly had an impact. I know for me personally, there was not a day in Desert Storm I didn't think of Vietnam. Vietnam and my experience in the hospital lit a hot blue flame in me that I wanted to be one of those who reunited, rebuilt the trust between the leaders and the led that I thought was fractured, indeed betrayed in Vietnam. A soldier said to me, about 2 weeks before we attacked, I was explaining the plan in the 3rd Armored Division, in General Butch Funk's 3rd Armored Division. "Don't worry, General, we trust you. That's what you're looking for."
But are you saying that the trust level wasn't there in Vietnam in terms of within the military?
Well, it was in the theater, it wasn't in tactical operations, but I think you had the senior leadership, perhaps political and perhaps military, who asked our young men and women to go to Vietnam, and there wasn't clarity of strategic objective,
mission and objective and goal,
and the authority to use all the means at our disposal at that time to gain the strategic objective.
You had an injury, a grenade injury to your foot, and then it resulted in an amputation.
Yes.
At that time, you never knew that you could be, that you could overcome that and be, a significant general in another war.
No,
you had no possibility that that would be part of your future.
No, I didn't. Charlie, I'm grateful, obviously, to the Army for allowing me to remain on active duty and giving me every chance to compete, and to my fellow soldiers who helped me, who provided me that opportunity.
You also, and I think I found this in conversations with other people, Bob Carey, for example, who also lost part of a leg. The hospital experience was horrific.
Yes.
Horrific because you felt what? Nobody visited you. Nobody came to say thank you.
Well, there was that. Certainly, there was that. I felt that for the soldiers I was with. That nobody, at least while I was there, senior to the rank of colonel, or anybody from elected office, ever came around and said to the soldiers, "Thanks for going and doing what we asked you to do, and doing it well and with great skill and with great courage."
Well, that's the great thing that America didn't do after that war.
That's correct.
I mean, across the board.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Why is his story significant to your story here?
Well, I mean, it's several reasons. Number one, Fred did, command 5 divisions and 150,000 troops. He was, shot up in Vietnam. He was one of the guys who rebuilt the Army, and the Army was just about prostrate in the early to mid 1970s. We'd killed off the NCO Corps in Vietnam.
That's non-commissioned officers.
The sergeants who really make it happen. We had drug problems.
Killed them off, meaning
they died.
They died in Vietnam.
We killed them off for not much gain. We had drug problems. We had race problems. Morale was gone. We had public antipathy, antipathy for the Army. Until it was the Army really was a pretty hollow shell in the early 70s. Well, Fred's one of the guys that fixed it. Fred and Colin Powell and Carl Vono and Butch Funk and a whole bunch of, and Pete Taylor and a whole bunch of other guys.
They fixed it by doing what? By
ask him. He did.
Well,
it.
Okay, but we're talking about the same thing. I mean, they fixed it because you came away with this notion that you had to have before you undertook the mission specific goals. You had to have support at home. You had to know exactly how. Go ahead. I mean, that's the kind of thing you've been talking about.
Yes,
but more.
You're right. That's certainly that's a part of it. That's that reuniting of trust. Certainly that was broken during, in my own judgment, during Vietnam. But it was more than that. It was the United States Army missed a whole generation of modernization of equipment during Vietnam. The volunteer army, the Congress abolished the draft in late 1972, early 1973. The Middle East War in 1973, I think.
The Yom Kippur War said what?
Shocked it really, I think, awakened everyone to the speed and lethality of modern combat. General Creighton Abrams, who was the Army Chief of Staff, and before him General Bill Westmoreland, started the Army back. They saw what needed to be done. They were World War II veterans. They saw the price of unpreparedness at the beginning of World War II and indeed at the beginning of Korea. And General Bill Depew, who was Commander of Training and Doctrine Command, saw the 73 war, and they started the Army back, their generation.
And they began to then acquire Bradley,
Yes.
Apache.
The Big Five program.
What are the other three?
So named the Bradley Apache, the M1 tank, the Black Hawk, and the Patriot.
Helicopters.
Yes, 2 helicopters, a tank and a Bradley, and the Patriot air defense system.
Then there was
Big
General.
Five.
Then there was Defense Chief James Schlesinger.
Yes.
Who did what? Who emphasized the importance of conventional warfare.
Schlesinger had come from Rand and believed, of course, in Europe being able to win in NATO, being able to win conventionally, not having to force the president to the nuclear option, so to speak. And so having the capabilities conventionally to withstand, indeed to deter, and if necessary, defeat a Warsaw Pact invasion of Western Europe without resorting to nuclear weapons. And what he saw in the Army he didn't like. And so he and Abrams got together and set the Army on a course to fix it.
What do we learn from Grenada?
Grenada was actually a pretty decent operation when you consider the thing was laid on in about 36 hours. And what we learned was we had good troops, and they do even better if they had a little bit of planning. But Grenada, given the time constraints involved, was a pretty successful operation.
Yeah. And what do you attribute, other than all the things we've talked about so far, the success in Desert Storm to?
Oh, good. My personal hobby horse is the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, where the Army, I was just out there a couple of weeks ago, where the Army plays highly realistic war games, and that's where we taught our commanders to think and to fight against adverse odds with high operational tempos. And you teach them that by pounding the crap up, by having the OPFOR, now the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, just pound the crap out of them when they don't do it right. But that's the great big battle laboratory where they discovered what worked and what didn't work, and then how to change what didn't to what did. That started about 1983 or so.
Yes.
And then Pete Taylor really got the thing on track in the mid '80s, and the Desert Storm was won at Fort Irwin, California.
What happens at Fort Irwin, California?
The most sophisticated war games you've ever seen. Like I said, I was just out there with 3-4 weeks ago.
What is it between this guy and the military?
Well, Tom's a great student of military history. Reads a lot. Great student of human behavior, obviously, from reading his novels. Great student of command. He and I talk a lot about command, so it's
guys you knew in the military read his stuff.
Correct.
Because his command, they used to say his command of understanding the technology.
Of people in crisis situations, of human behavior in crisis situations, of leaders, Tom's own reading in military history.
And why are you so obsessed by it? Why is it that this is the thing that so attracts you? Obsessed may be too strong.
I'm interested in a lot of things. I got to get back to the hotel. I got a copy of the Scientific American because I like to keep track of that too. This is an important form of human activity. Why is it important? Well, you're a representative of the free press. Who gave America the free press? The answer, the Continental Army in the War of Independence against Britain. All the rights we have.
Because they won independence.
Yeah,
under the leadership of George Washington.
All the rights we have, our material prosperity, our ability to go to the churches we choose to go to, all these were won for us by people carrying guns.
Yeah. So, in other words, the armed services of a country are one of the principal institutions that protects the freedom.
Exactly. In our case, first they established it, then they protected it, and also extending it to others. If you think about it, liberation is a great theme of American history. We bring liberty to others. We've done it. We've done it to Europe. We've done it in Asia. We did it with Kuwait. Bringing our gift of freedom to other people is an American tradition.
How do American generals stack up?
Well, they win pretty regularly, don't they? People talk about how great Erwin Rommel was.
Yeah,
we beat him. How great the German army was. Well, we beat it twice. The Japanese are supposed to be a great economic power. Well, militarily, they weren't all that great. We win a lot, and that's as good as you have to be.
Who's the best general in your judgment in American history?
We were talking about that on the train yesterday. I think MacArthur.
You think MacArthur?
Yeah.
Because of his strategic vision and what he did in the Korean War and that landing in Incheon?
Well,
Is that
Douglas MacArthur was a guy who was born on a cavalry post, I think in New Mexico, around 1880 or so. And so he was born when high tech was a soldier with a single shot Sharps carbine on the back of a horse. And when he ended, he had jet airplanes and nuclear weapons. Now, it's a great big jump, and he made the jump.
You share this judgment?
For a great strategic vision, I think you could also, Tom and I talked about this, you could make a case for George Marshall.
And certainly the best political general we ever had.
Well,
who understood
a man
the
of
combination.
Vision, a man of vision, I think, a man who saw the whole of World War II and the allocation of forces, Pacific theater, the European theater, and strategically directed that masterfully, preparing the United States Army.
Patton.
Patton, great tactical commander, a great student of the military profession, a great reader. Certainly behind the persona of Patton, you will find a great and serious student of the art of maneuver warfare.
Pershing.
World War I is not a war in which any general really had a chance to shine very much because it was essentially Civil War tactics and 20th century firepower. So it was, I mean, America lost 200,000 soldiers in a very brief period of time.
So we're not very high on Blackjack Pershing.
Well, he didn't have a chance. No general in World War II, with a couple of World War I, with a couple of exceptions, really had a chance to show what he could do because the tactics were so stultified on both sides.
Yeah. You know what amazes me when you talk about generals is the notion that after World War I, all of these guys, certainly Eisenhower and MacArthur and Patton and Bradley and others I'm missing, had no, I mean, they thought their career was going nowhere. Yes?
Well, they just, they
were down in Mexico or somewhere. I mean,
they spent a lot of time in schools. They spent a lot of time reading and studying the profession in case the country needed them again. And that's what professionals do. I asked Captain, now Major H.R. McMaster, after there was a battle in here called 73 Easting. He was commanding a cavalry troop, great aggressive cavalry action. Yeah. I asked him how long it lasted. He said 23 minutes. And essentially, that's what professionals do. They spend their whole professional lifetime getting ready for those 23 minutes, so when the time comes, they can execute, do what they need to do to accomplish the mission at least cost to their troops.
Why did you leave the Army?
It's custom and law to leave the Army after 35 years. I had a wonderful career. Certainly wasn't easy all the time, but a great and rewarding life. So at the end of, actually I was asked to stay on a little longer by then Chief of Staff of the Army, Gordon Sullivan, and the Secretary of the Army, Togo West. So I stayed just, I think, 1 or 2 days shy of 35 and a half years.
There's much talk today about, on the cover of both Newsweek and Time, is Lieutenant Kelly Flynn. It's about orders. It's about issues like that.
I only know what I read in the papers on this one, all right, because nothing ever went before a court, so no facts have actually been established. It's reported that she was fooling around with somebody. Okay, Charlie, boys and girls are going to be boys and girls, whether they're wearing uniforms or civilian clothes. Fine, it happens. The military, however, is an organization in which the currency is life and death. If you screw up, people die. As a result of that, the military is an organization which does not tolerate lying. And it's been reported that she lied, and that's the reason she got into trouble.
General, what would you add to that?
I think that pretty well sums it up. All I know about the case also is what I read in the papers and
that's all I know.
What I've seen on television, Charlie.
But that point of view is the point of view of the Air Force, which is
yes, it is.
Question of order and a question of disobeying order and question of.
I think I noticed the Air Force Chief Ron Fogelman on testifying, I believe, before the Senate Armed Services Committee, and he made that point.
Yeah. But here's the other point, though. I mean, and I'm just asked this out of curiosity, which comes back, and I think pretty much the consensus is what Tom just expressed today. Mm-hmm. The other point, though, is whether rules about adultery in the armed forces, based on what you just said, boys and girls in the military are not going to be any different, are so badly construed and so badly in need of change so you don't put people in the position where they're lying up one side and down the other. Can you make that argument? I
think Secretary Cohen has asked, Secretary of Defense Cohen has asked for a review of all of that. I think certainly as Uniform Code of Military Justice has changed over the years, and there are periods of time when certain parts of it undergo reexamination, and that's probably a healthy thing. Those things ought to be debated and talked about. Back to this book, Into the Storm, A Study in Command. General Schwarzkopf, how good a commander?
He was good enough to win. That's what you pay him for.
Come on, now you would.
His job was to be the overall theater commander, to coordinate all the services together, to maintain a political alliance, kind of like Eisenhower did.
Yeah.
I mean, he had to keep the Saudis happy and the Qataris happy and the Kuwaitis happy. He had a pretty full plate, and that denied him the ability to oversee tactical operations up north.
Which is one of the problems you point out in this book, that the communication between where you were and where Schwarzkopf was not perfect.
What we've done in this book, Charlie, is laid out the battle in 7th Corps as it was happening day by day, hour by hour at the front, where the action was taking place. So it's a view of the battle from the perspective of the front line, so to speak, not the perspective of headquarters in Riyadh or even Washington, and much of it taken from individual accounts of soldiers and commanders who were there. Some of it from official Army records that's now available.
Right. You take note here that when there was a 1990 meeting between General Schwarzkopf and other generals, including you, everybody was sort of standing up saying, right on, General, but you were sitting there looking at the mission statement or something and weren't cheering enough, so that General Schwarzkopf thought that you were not as enthusiastic about him as some others. Have I retold that reasonably clear?
That's correct. Yes. Well, I had gotten a mission, Charlie, and what I was doing was looking at the map, internalizing it, going through in my mind, and I was very enthusiastic about the mission. I thought it was exactly the right mission for 7th Corps. We were an armored corps. I was coming down there with 2 armored divisions, plus a division from the United States, and then we would add 2 more to it there in the theater. And so it was the correct, perfect mission for us. I was very pleased with the mission, and what I was doing was internalizing it.
Thinking about the task rather than thinking about congratulating the general.
Yes, and because I had my own division commanders right there, what I wanted to do was give them some early heads-up guidance so they could start some of their own thinking, and that's what a commander does.
What we really talk about is a difference in style. You've noticed that Fred is not the most excitable guy in the world.
Right.
And he just, as I say in the book, he's the quiet lion. I mean, he does the job and doesn't jump up and down and scream about it. Just a difference in style. Norm tends to jump up and down and be a bit of a screamer. There's anything wrong with that. He's a different personality. Different people act different ways.
How much of it for you, because you've had an opportunity because of what you write and the success of your books, so that you've had to make a huge contribution, all right? And it's been very good to you as well. How much of you regrets terribly the fact that because of your eyesight you could not serve in the military?
I don't know that I would have made it a career. I felt as though I owed it to my country to serve a couple of years. If I had it to do all over again, I would have gone into the Navy and been surface line officer, because I just like being at sea. Although at the time I wanted to be a tanker, so I just, as I grew up, I found that I just like being at sea, and commanding a warship, I think is a pretty good job.
And I've been great as a tanker.
All right, Tom Clancy with General Fred Franks, Jr., retired. Into the Storm, a study in command. This is the first of a series, yes?
Yes.
In which you'll look at great military leaders and their makeup and the mission that they were on, the battles they were in,
yes,
the victories they won, and figure out what we can learn from that.
Yes, sir. We'll see you again.
Well, I certainly hope so. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to meet you. Once again, the book is by Tom Clancy with General Fred Franks, Jr. is Into the Storm, a study in command. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.